So you're probably wondering what this report is and what it isn't. So let me give you the quick version. What it is a report that is independent of the World Bank. Number two, it's a set of observations about what drives long-term growth. It is not a blueprint in any sense of the word. Thirdly, it's made up, the Commission is made up, as I said, mostly of policymakers, many from developing countries, who are talking to their peers. And the way it was discussed in our Commission meetings was this is the generation of policymakers that have been in the trenches and have done the hard and heavy lifting, giving their best advice to the next generation of policymakers. So this is in no way a rich to poor or top-down kind of advisory report. Fourthly, it hopefully has a minimum of ideology in it. And lastly, it's not about development assistance, with due respect to Nancy and the CGD. This is not giving advice on how to design better or more effective foreign aid. It's about what countries themselves can do. So the first message is the centrality of growth, as you would expect from a report that is known as the growth report. Secondly, it stresses the important role of government. And I think this is perhaps a nuance different from what one has heard over the last decade or so, where people perhaps have said, get government out of the way. You know, government is a problem. The third point, the first was growth, the second was government. The third point has to do with leveraging the global economy. I think that the analysis that was done and the view of the commissioners is that to speed, catch up, and to drive growth for decade upon decade, it is virtually impossible to do this without leveraging the global economy. So globalization is not an option, it is a necessity. The question is, how do you link to it, and what do you need to do to benefit from the system? And the corollary is that the system needs to be receptive to countries that want to participate. Let me move on then to the fourth point, which I wanted to stress, which is that whereas we talk about a variety of policy interventions, we talk about the importance of infrastructure, for example, we talk about the importance of investment, and notionally say that countries that have really grown very rapidly have tended to invest perhaps as much as 25% of GDP in investment.
So if I want to make a sort of provocative statement, I would say that the prevalence of the optimal policy approach, which implies an excess of fixed solutions, excess of orthodoxy, leads to suboptimal growth performance. That's a pretty strong statement.
Poor countries cannot make it unless they participate not just in ideas, capital, and so on, but especially in exports to the rest of the world. It's impossible to grow in a sustainable manner unless you have a significant, changing, transforming package of exports.
Okay, let me just put down a marker. I won't talk about it because it's not the right moment, but I think that it's a little simple-minded to assume that globalization is only about trade or capital movements, when in fact a lot of the technology changes that in fact account for much of the problem of inequality and growing inequality, the vehicle for their rapid transfer and diffusion is in part through trade and capital movements. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes on this issue, the public might know, the voters and the public might have some sort of a vague insight about all of this that's a little different from the way we define it academically. Mm-hmm.